对，对啊，对的，对对对，对对对对对. Dui. A character in Chinese that everyone learns early on because it means correct. Dui. But don't be thinking that's all there is to it. There are several other ways to use dui that not only will allow you to express yourself much more clearly, but native speakers will be quite impressed. And hey, 你好, if you don't know me, I'm Phil Crimmins, co-founder and CEO of Mandarin Blueprint, and after learning and teaching Chinese for a combined 22 years now, my buddy Luke and I set out on a mission to detail the ultimate blueprint for Mandarin fluency, and one of those details is the Chinese character dui. Now, today we're going to cover a lot. We're going to show you how dui can just mean right or correct. And there's a little bit more to it than you might think, but many of you may have learned that one. But how about actions towards, or maybe feelings towards? That could be an interesting thing to explore. How about when you want to show the opposite of something or flip your perspective? There's pairs and halves. Didn't see that one coming, did you? And then there's also a way to check or compare using dui. And we'll finally finish with as far as X is concerned. So you got a lot on your plate today, but let's get started with the one that most people know. They know that dui means correct, that somebody is right. And whether it's validating a choice or reinforcing a point, this structure lets you affirm accuracy. So let's get into it. Now, the main way that you can think of this is that you have a person or a phrase, and then you have 是对的. This is a good way of saying someone or something is right. Simple, right? So let's give some examples. 这件事你是对的. You are right about this. And what I like about this structure is this happens a lot in Chinese, where they sort of set the statement. They like make a statement, and this is the comment and response. 这件事. This is the thing I'm talking about. Now I'm going to make a comment on it. 你是对的, right? And so I love that structure. You're going to see that a lot, and it allows you to be able to flip around the grammar a lot of times. And so let's look at some other examples here. 妈妈说的话是对的. So what is the subject here? Well, it's what mom said. 妈妈说的话, the words said by mom, right? So you just add 是对的 at the end, and that means it's right. And by the way, this can sometimes not just mean right or correct as in like, as opposed to false. Sometimes it means right like this is right and just. Hey, quick one. Just wanted to let you know, if you click that link below this video, you can get lifetime access to the first 20 levels of the blueprint. We call it the Blueprint Lite. Totally free. Whole community built around it to help you if you have any trouble. It's really easy. It's free. Check it out. Click that link. 快点点. Back to the video. 老板这么做的是对的. The boss is right to do this. See, this is a little bit different than just saying like that is factually correct versus that is factually incorrect. What we're saying is that he's right in some higher sense, in like a moral sense, perhaps, to do this. Or maybe, if not in a moral sense, he's justified in doing this. And so this is an example that a lot of times people will learn dui, and they'll just think it means like true as opposed to false. Now, it can mean that, but it also has this other meaning. 正确. If you want to use a word that definitely means like correct as opposed to incorrect, 正确 is the word you can use for that. I noticed that in Chinese game shows, a lot of times, you know, that moment where somebody submits the answer and the host is trying to build suspense, like, was it correct? Was it incorrect? 正确, right? So they'll give an answer that way. Now, if you have an action plus 对了, it means the result of the action is right or correct. So very useful to know that this, because it's another one of those examples in Chinese of the verb result situation. Let me explain. So look at this sentence. 我跟对了，老板. 我跟对了，老板. I chose the right boss to follow. Okay, so 跟, it literally means heel. And it, interestingly enough, ends up meaning and, but that makes perfect sense because when you're following on someone's heels, well, that's the action. You're following them, so you're on their heels. So when you say 跟对了, it means that the verb of following resulted in the correct outcome or the right outcome, the just outcome. So 我跟对了老板 is I chose the right boss to follow. But what about this one? 这本书我买对了. I bought the right book. 这本书我买对了. So this is again, it's setting up that topic like we did in the first sentence. 这本书, that's what we're talking about. All right, now I'm going to make a comment on it. 我买对了, right? I love that. And that means that you have made the right choice. It was a correct purchase. How about this? 这个问题麦克答对了. So yet another example sentence where you have the comment at the beginning or the subject at the beginning, then you comment on it. 这个问题麦克答对了, right? So what is the action here? 答, that means to respond in some way. So if you 答对, that means you were correct. So in this instance, I think it's almost certainly true that 对 means correct as opposed to incorrect factually. And so it's all contextual, right? Now, here's a few more words that you'll see where 对 means right or correct, and you tend to use them at the end of a sentence. So let's give some examples here. We have 对 plus 吗, 对吗. Now, this just means, is that right? There is no certainty. It could be 50-50 in your mind if you say that. So for example, 我的回答对吗? Is my answer correct? You are not leaning one way or the other. You're just asking, is it correct? Now, I'll come back to that in a second, but if the answer was no, it's not correct, you would say 不对, 不对. And some of you might be noticing that 不, which is normally fourth tone, switches to second tone. And this is because 不 always changes to second tone if it comes before a fourth tone character. And that's to make it flow better. It's much easier to say 不对 than it is to say 不对. It's not impossible, but it flows nicely in the sentence. 不对, 不对, 不是, 不错. There's a lot of these that you'll say in Chinese. And so this is why that flow, that tone sandy happens. So then let's take a look at this. 麦克的工作态度是不对的. Mike's work attitude is incorrect. So now we're back to kind of the idea of this is more of a incorrect in a grander sense. It's not like factually incorrect. It's like there's a 态度 issue here. There's a attitude issue. Now, what about this? 对不对? Well, really, if you say 对不对, this is the same as 对吗? 我们是朋友,对不对? We are friends, right? You know, you're saying, is that right or not? You know, maybe you're in an early part of the friendship and you're asking that. Or, 我的回答对不对? Is my answer correct? This is the same sentence as before, but instead of ending with 对吗, we're ending with 对不对? Both are fine. And, you know, there might be a minor tonal difference. Like perhaps if you're saying 对不对, you're a little bit more forceful. You know, you're being a little bit more like, is my answer correct? Right? Like you're getting a little bit more in there, but it's very subtle. And it depends on your tone of voice. It depends on the context. So I would just say that meaning-wise, they're exactly the same. Now, then you have 对吧. And 对吧 is a little bit different because you're kind of sure of yourself when you say 对吧, right? That means you're almost just being polite, like 我们现在出发,对吧? We're leaving now, yeah? So you're pretty sure that that's what's happening. You're like 99% sure. You're even 90% sure. But you say 对吧 to indicate that you're pretty sure of this, but, you know, let me just check with you. Let me just be polite and check with you. And so 对吗 in comparison, that is not sure. That's just, it could be 50-50, right? But, so by saying 对吧, you're saying, yeah, we're leaving now, right? So there you have right and correct. And this is the most common usage, but listen, the next few usages are not uncommon at all. In fact, you're going to see it now that I've pointed it out. If you keep watching your Chinese content, you're going to see these come up all the time. So 对 has the sense of towards, when you're doing an action towards someone. And this can be something that is somewhat abstract, and it's not always the right character for towards. There's also 向 or 往. But you'll see what I mean when you get a few example sentences, and it is often the case with subtle distinctions between different words that translate the same way in English. the way that you really understand it is not by me explaining it. It's by seeing them in enough contexts and getting enough Chinese characters under your belt that you can read lots of sentences that contain this character, and you'll just start to get a feeling for it. Like, I just know when the right time is to use wang or xiang or dui because I've just seen a lot of Chinese. I've read a lot of Chinese. And so when I think about it as meaning action toward, I'm like, well, wait, there are other things that mean towards, even chao can mean towards sometimes. So like, do I need to really understand these differences? Intellectually, you don't really. You'll get it with enough comprehensible input. But a video like this that explains these things, it's like a supplement. It's like a way of making your consumption a little bit better because you notice a bit more. But don't make a mistake thinking that by watching this video, you've now mastered dui. What will make you master it is seeing it a lot. So let's keep going. Now, if you have noun 1, dui, noun 2, plus a verb, it means that noun 1 is taking that action towards noun 2. So examples will make this clear. Ma Li 对我笑了. Mary smiled at me. So, 玛丽对我. So, in Chinese, you tend to put all of that stuff at the beginning of the sentence. Like, who is towards who? And then you say the verb at the end. By the way, this is one of the reasons why those instantaneous translation apps, that the idea that we'll be able to have like an earpiece that listens to the person and instantaneously translates. Well, until they're picking up on the neural firings, they won't be able to translate in real time, because if the verb comes at the end of the sentence, it's like you could have this long drawn out sentence, and it's like, yesterday at the store, my garbage man murdered, laughed, fought a goat. Like, it's like there could be any number of things that come at the very end of the sentence. And so the translation app, no matter how fast it is, you'll never pick up on it as fast as if you were talking to somebody in person. So let's take a look at this. 我们对着星星许愿. We towards the stars wish. We made wishes upon the stars. And you'll notice here you have 对着. And all that indicates is that, like, when you say 对着, in my experience, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's presently happening, although that can be what it means. But it means more literally, you were 对着, like, there are the stars, I'm 对着 stars. Like, I'm like, actually, it's literal here in the sense of, like, if Mary is smiling towards me, maybe she's smiling at the guy behind me. No, when you say 对着星星, you're being really clear that this is actually happening in a physical sense. 邻居家的狗一直对我叫. The neighbor's dog kept barking at me. The at in 对我叫 is 对, right? So this is the literal sense that the dog is facing a certain direction and they're barking at you. And, this is kind of the way you tend to use it, right? There's some kind of person who's doing a behavior of some kind towards someone else. Like when you talk about the character Wang, which means, like, for example, 往左转, that would mean turn left, towards left turn, right? And you go, okay, well, that translates as towards. Yeah, but this is more like behaviors that happen towards one thing to another. And so it's often people, but it could be a dog at a person. It's some kind of sentient life doing an action towards another sentient life. And again, I'm way over analyzing it. I'm just saying that this is how you end up feeling about it. You're like, well, no, I'm talking about two people and their actions towards each other. Using Wang feels wrong. Like, it's like dui is the one that feels right here. Now, another way that you can think of it meaning towards is in a word you may already know, but didn't understand how it was constructed. So look here, 对不起. You may have learned this already as meaning sorry, but why does it mean sorry? Because think of what we have here. 对, towards, 不, not, 起, rise to. So I do not rise to. If I say 我对不起你, what I'm saying is I did wrong by you. I did not rise to what you deserve, right? It's kind of quite poetic in that sense. And so when people say 我对不起你. That means I did wrong by you. And then slowly over time, it just became 对不起. That means, oh, sorry. And it's stronger than other versions of sorry because it's such a, I'm unworthy of you. I've done wrong by you. I did not rise to what you deserve. It's like quite strong, right? So this is why if you say 对不起 for something that is quite subtle, then you might get looked askance at. Like, why? Okay, it's no big deal, right? But if you say 对不起 when you really think that you've done something wrong, then it's appropriate. In that case, you wouldn't really want to say, 抱歉, right, or something like that. That would be a little bit softer. So there you have 对不起 and why it means sorry. But you could say 对得起. Now we did a video on 的 previously, a character masterclass. Hey, maybe we can have a card pointing to that video as well. But the 对得起 idea here is when 的 comes between an action and its result, then it means capable of achieving that action. And when 不 is put between the verb and the result, it means incapable of achieving that action. So another way to think about this is towards not possible to rise and towards possible to rise. And it means rise to as in rise to the standard of some kind, or rise to the moral equivalence, if that makes sense. And so by saying 对得起, it means to do right by, to be worthy of. And so often you might see it in the context like this. 他对得起这份工作. He is worthy of this job. He rises to, it is possible for him to rise to the level of it. And admittedly, people do not say 对得起 nearly as much as they say 对不起. But it just goes to show that this is a structure, this 不 的 being in between a verb and a result, that happens all the time. So look out for it. Now, that's actions towards. What about feelings towards? Because this is actually a really useful thing to be able to do in life. How do you feel towards something, place, person, whatever? And so let's unlock how to get more personal about your feelings. So if you have a noun after 对, right? And then you have a psychological verb, something like love, hate, like, disgusted by, whatever. That is how you say feel emotion toward that thing, whatever. Someone, something. Let's give some examples. 我对画画感兴趣. So 感兴趣, that's a really great word. It means to feel interest or be interested in, right? So 感 is feel, 兴趣 is an interest of some kind. So the feeling of interest is like the way you describe something you are interested in. So 感兴趣 always gets combined with 对, in my opinion. It's not literally like every single time, but it often is I or person 对 something like painting 画画感兴趣 By the way, I've always loved the word 画画 because it shows that characters can be both noun and verbs. So 画 can mean to draw, and it can also be the drawing 画. So if you draw a drawing 画画 easy, right? 我对画画感兴趣 right? So that just means I towards this activity feel what? I feel interest. And you don't always have to put 感. You can have other emotions that you might feel, but 感兴趣 is really cool word because it's just, combining the feeling with the actual idea of interest itself. How about this one? 麦克对丽莎很失望. Mike is very disappointed with Lisa. Oh, Mike, don't be so disappointed with people. So you've got two things here, two people. Mike towards Lisa, and then after that, if I said 麦克对丽莎笑了, that's an action he takes towards her. It's like more real. It's like actually something that happened in the world. But if we say 麦克对丽莎很失望, he's lost the vision. That's what disappointed is, or lose hope, or lose the vision. 失望. Such a poetic way to describe disappointment. I've lost the vision of you. I've lost the hope. And so anyway, so that's a feeling. And so when you want to describe how you feel towards a person, this is great. Great way to express that kind of idea. 老板对他满意吗? 满意. I love that word for satisfied. It literally means filled up meaning. So you're satisfied when you're filled up with meaning. So is your boss towards you satisfied? And then you add ma to turn into a yes or no question. And so again, feelings here. Person towards person, what is their feeling? Now, it's also important to talk about how you can have allergies towards things, and this is the way that you describe the feeling that you get when you're allergic to something. And so Chinese do think of allergies as more like almost emotional. I don't think we tend to think of it that way, but I think it's maybe an effect of Chinese traditional medicine. But like if you say 我对猫过敏, it literally means I towards cats overly sensitive. Now, we also actually did a presentation on 过, and we covered this word 过敏, and there's lots of different things you could be allergic to, but it doesn't really matter what it is. Just replace 猫 with anything. 我对花生过敏, I'm allergic to peanuts. Okay. 我对花粉过敏, I'm allergic to pollen. That was me when I was a kid. And it could be any other substance, or maybe it's a medicine you're allergic to. Very useful to know this, right? So I towards something, 过敏, is I'm allergic to that thing. Now, there are a couple more formal words you can use here. 对于 is one of them. It really just means regarding, and it kind of functions the same way. It just tends to get used a little bit more formally. But to be clear, and as a reminder, formal Chinese gets used all the time. People use formal Chinese frequently. There are some words that are really only ever written and never spoken, but 对于 is not one of them. Like, this is a word that people will say all the time. And just think about life. Life has formal settings, and they're not always like, I'm going to a formal ballroom right now and I'm speaking to the head CEO. It's not always like that. Maybe you're walking into a bank and people are working, and so they want to be a little bit more professional. So these types of formal settings, they come up more than you might think. You're like, oh, I want to learn how to speak Chinese. I want to learn how to be all formal and at some, big black tie event. And it's like, yeah, but it's not just there. 对于这个问题，我有一个解决方案. For this problem, I have a solution, right? So this is an example. Some of you are saying this at work or something like that. And 对于 is really just a slightly more formal way of saying 对. You could say 对这个问题，我有一个解决方案. That would be fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But 对于这个问题 makes you sound a little bit more educated. Why not? Now, 针对, I love this word because it literally means needle for, and so this is a way of getting even clearer about something being targeted at something else. 针对, aimed at. And so again, we're still dealing with towards, but it's a little bit more targeted. It's targeted like a needle. So how about this one? 推销产品要针对客户的需求. Selling products should target the needs of the customers. Like a needle, look towards the needs of the customer. Pretty cool, right? And then you can have your luck selling products. And so, yeah, that's 针对 for you. So these are the feelings towards that you can use 对 for. I hope that you found that useful. I mean, the actions towards and the feelings towards parts of 对 are only slightly less common than using 对 to mean right or correct. So let's look at when 对 means opposite. Okay, so a lot of times you're trying to say that something is either the opposite of you literally in space, or you're saying it's the opposite position theoretically. Maybe they're the opposing idea, right? And 对 tends to get used a lot in this type of context. Maybe they're your opponent in ping pong, right? It's like there's lots of different things there. So how about these words? 对方, the opposite square or the opposite side. Well, this is the other party. This is how you tend to talk about the other party in a conversation, the other party in a cooperation, in a negotiation, this type of thing. It's a little bit more formal, but on the other hand, you're going to be in formal situations. Like I said, for example, 在合作中，我们要尊重对方的意见. In cooperation, we need to respect the opinions of the other party. Right. So 对方的意见. So 对方, it's a generalized term for the other person who's in some kind of cooperation or whatever. And so it's good to learn general words, because the more specific a word gets, the more advanced you should really be before you worry about it, right? But something like 对方, that just means the other side in a negotiation, cooperation, whatever. Very useful word, because maybe you don't know the specific word for something, what their position is in the company and how to say that yet in Chinese. Well, you can say 对方if they're on the other side of a some kind of conversation. So then how about this one? 对面. 对面. Now, 面has got a bunch of different meanings. So I should probably do a presentation on 面 as well. But 面 can mean an area of some kind. So if it's the opposite area, in this case, we're being quite literal. We're saying, right now my camera is 在我对面, right? And you could describe the various things that are across from each other. So with 对面, I want you to think in terms of physical space, something being opposite something else. Like that's how the Brits say it. And like we would say, across the street from in America, or like across from. And so think of this one as being more physical in its manifestation. And again, that doesn't mean that literally every time someone has said 对面, it doesn't necessarily have a metaphorical meaning. I'm just saying in practical day-to-day life, it's usually used in the physical. So the literal kind of way, the concrete versus abstract. Yeah, that's the way. 坐在我对面是杰克, right? So the guy sitting across from me is Jack. Sitting opposite me is Jack. That's not like a 对方, like the other party in this abstract cooperation we're doing. No, 对面. There he is. There's 杰克. 对话. Opposite speech. Okay, opposite speech. Well, this is a dialogue or a talk of some kind. 对话. So in this instance, what we're getting across is that there is a two-person, it's usually two people, hence why there's an opposite element. It's not that you couldn't have I feel like if there's a bigger group of people, you'll probably say 讨论, which is like to tease out a thesis, right? 讨论, that's a discussion. It feels a bit more like there's many people. When you say 对话, it tends to be two. Again, not literally, don't literally quote me to that. I'm just saying that that's the situations where I tend to see it. For example, 这是一次有趣的对话. This is an interesting conversation. So just by labeling it that, you're saying, okay, yeah, it's a conversation. There's an opposite talk. There's a back and forth. There must be, otherwise how could there be an opposite, right? So yet another example where 对 is meaning opposite. How about this one? 对比, opposite compare. Well, this is a comparison. It also can mean to compare. And so I don't want to go too deep into that because I want to do a conversation about B at some point. But just know that you can have something that is a 对比, something that is a comparison. But you could also say, hey, compare those two things. 对比一下. Right? Like go ahead and compare those two things. That's fine. But we'll get more into that when we cover B. Now, 手 obviously means hand. This is the character for hand. And it does end up getting these other metaphorical meanings. Like, for example, 乐手, that means musician of some kind. And it just or really just somebody who has their hand in music. That's kind of like the way I like to think of it, is you've gotten your hand into something. And so even a 新手 is a newbie, a new person at putting their hand in it. So maybe you're a Chinese 新手 right now. But when it's used in this way, it's referring to a person who does the thing. And if you're the opposite person, well, you're my opponent. 我的对手, my opponent, right? So let's check out this sentence. 想要赢就要先了解我们的对手. To win, we need first to understand our opponent, right? And I just kind of love how you can use 手 in that way. There's so many words that are like that. So look out for that as you continue to look around the language. 手 doesn't always literally mean someone's hand. It's sometimes the person who has their hand in that thing. All right. How about 反对? 反 also means opposite, or like the flip side. Flip side, opposite. So we have a doubled up word. If you are 反对, if you're the opposite, it's you're against something, you're opposed to it. And you'll often use this in the context of like, I'm opposed to like this policy of some kind. Or 我反对这个提议. I am against this suggestion, right? 反对. It's just the way you say against as opposed to for. So, we've covered how it means opposite. You can also use 对 to talk about pairs and halves. It's kind of interesting because you can use it as a measure word in this context. For example, suppose you see 一对. If you have 一对, one pair, well, this actually is just a measure word. So we understand that Chinese has a lot of measure words. 个. We did a presentation on 个 earlier, and that's the universal measure word. Well, this is a measure word for pairs of things. And in the case of 对, it tends to be pairs of things that they can be pairs, but they could maybe be separated in some way. But then there's another example of a measure word for pairs, which is 双. And in that case, it tends to be like things that they feel inseparable in some sense. But let me give you an example. 汉娜刚生了一对双胞胎. Now, I love this sentence because it actually has the character 双 in it, because the word for twins is 双胞胎, literally, like, I guess, double womb fetus is the literal translation of those three characters. And so when you have 双, it tends to be things that have some degree of inseparability to them, right? But the twins themselves are 一对, because of course they can operate separately. And what's interesting is you can have a bunch of other 对s, right? You could have 一对手套, like a pair of gloves. You could have 一对耳环, pair of earrings, right? Interestingly enough, you could say 一对筷子, right? Which means a pair of chopsticks. But I noticed that Chinese people tend to say 一双筷子, which to me indicates that on some level in their hearts, Chinese people go, well, there's no such thing as a chopstick that doesn't have its other chopstick. If it doesn't have its second chopstick, it's not even chopsticks. So they are inseparable, even if they technically are two independent objects. And I love that. And by the way, sometimes people say this thing about like Chinese people are like they're sticking with chopsticks after all these years, after the much superior fork and knife came out. And to those people, I just say, you've never had really good Chinese food and seen how awesome it is to just be able to pick the little tiny nuggets of it with your chopsticks. It's a much better tool for the way that Chinese food is prepared. So, come at me, bro. Anyway, so then you also have 配对, which means match, pair. So you can see that this has kind of got a good relationship there. 配对, and it means to pair up. Very useful way to think of this word because it can be quite literal. 你能帮我把这些袜子配对吗? Can you help me pair these socks, right? So you get here that it's not like a pairing of like star-crossed lovers. There's not anything wrong with that per se, but this is literally like, oh, there's two socks, I need to pair them up, right? So 配对, you can see how that works. I'd love to do one on pei sometime. It's a great character. Now, 对半, pair, half, 对半. Well, this can literally mean split in half. And you might think, well, why would I need to say that? Well, here's an example. 他把苹果对半切开. He cut the apple in half. And by saying 对半切开, it's making it clear that it's in half, as opposed to if you just said 他把苹果切开, which would be perfectly fine. It could just be that he opened the apple and it took a quarter off of it, right? But by saying 对半切开, it's very clear. Okay, exactly in half. Go draw a painting of it. And then you have 对分. And again, if you're thinking of 对 in terms of its half usage, well, this means divide equally. 对分. And usually you'll do that in the context of maybe work you're dividing equally, but you can use it in another contexts too. So there's 对, meaning pairs and halves. Well, what about if you want to check or compare things, like double checking facts or making side-by-side comparisons? You'll see how 对 can be used in this way. So let's take a look at this group of words. 和对, 和. So this character, I love this character because it means a number of different things. One of the things it means is nucleus, right? So if you if you consider the word 核物, that means nucleus thing, which means nuclear, and then 核武器 is a nuclear device or a nuclear bomb, right? And so so it's a really interesting character. But then it also can just mean to check or verify something. And I feel like that actually does make sense, because if you really wanted to know if something is truly the case, then you could go like down to the nucleus and figure out what's really going on. And so I kind of like that 和 developed into this. So 核对 is the word you would use for check, like in the context of verifying numbers, right? So, or it doesn't have to only be numbers, but like numbers give you a good example of like what it means. So, 请核对这些数字. Please verify these numbers. So, numbers are objective. You want to 核对 it, verify it, make sure, check, right? Now, how about this? 对一遍, check one time, and 遍 is like time as in like I saw it 5 times. And also 遍 doesn't just mean a time, it means a time fully, right? 次 is also a word that means like times, like I saw her 2 times, right? But when you say 遍, it's like if you read a book and you say 看一遍, it means you read it the entire thing, right? That's what 遍 tends to mean. So 对一遍, check one time, it means to go over once, and often go over, like again or something like that, depends. But 咱们对一遍这些文件. Let's go over these files once, right? So it's just 对一遍. If you say 对一遍, it means check a full time, like a full go through, and you'll definitely have opportunity to use that in day-to-day life. Now, 对照, compare according to, 对照, right? This is like for side-by-side comparisons of some kind. 对照. And 照, yeah, it means according to. It's also the character that means like to illuminate. For example, you 拍照. That means to take a picture. So 照 can mean illuminates, compare to illuminate. So there's a feeling here that you're not just comparing for no reason, like you're comparing because you want to get to the bottom of something. 请对照新旧版本. Please contrast the new and old versions. And again, I just have this feeling when I see 对照 that what we're getting across is like compare these old and new versions, because that will be enlightening in some way, right? Now, we've talked about these many different usages, and I want to end with one that I think is really useful in day-to-day life, which is to get across the idea, well, as far as X is concerned, so let's get into it. 对 plus a person, usually it's a person, 来说 plus an opinion. As far as person is concerned, this opinion, right? So this comes up all the time. You're going to see this in TV shows now. You're going to see it in the books you're reading, whatever. It's going to come across your plate a lot. And it literally means towards person come the speech, right? And so let's look at how you might use it in real life. 这个工作对我来说很重要. This job is very important to me. And by the way, you can move it around. You could say, 对我来说这个工作很重要. That would be fine. It's not wrong to put it first. A lot of times teachers teach it as first, but it doesn't have to be. In this instance, we have that same old structure that keeps coming up throughout this video, and I'm glad it keeps coming up because it's like a good thing for you guys to know, which is setting the table, topic, comment. The topic is 这个工作. Okay, what's your comment on it? 对我来说很重要. Oh, it's important to you. Okay, as far as you're concerned, it's very important, right? So look out for this. It doesn't always have to come first. And then look at this one. This is an example where it does come first. 对你来说婚姻代表什么? What does marriage mean to you? 婚姻代表, that means that represent. So what does marriage represent to you? And so, there's another example of it. And you can put a different person there. And you could put other things there. You could say like, 对公司来说. But it would kind of be, I would argue that person who says like, as far as the company is concerned, they're anthropomorphizing the company. Like, really, at the end of the day, it's like, what do the individuals on the board of directors say? Like, that's really what's going on, because nobody else can 来说. Like, it's something that is an abstract concept, can't express an opinion. You know what I mean? It's kind of interesting how corporations are people, though. 对理查德来说，音乐就是一切. To Richard, music is everything. Well, Richard, my man. So, by the way, 理查德. Isn't that I love that. That's the way that you say Richard in Chinese. And so, again, you can put any person in between plus 来说, and it means in that person's opinion as far as that person is concerned. So you're going to come across that all the time, and you're going to come across all of these. We've covered quite a bit today. So here's a quick recap of what we've done. We've talked about how to affirm someone or something is correct, directing actions towards someone, and also what you feel towards someone or something. We've also talked about how things can be opposite of one another, either literally or metaphorically. We've talked about pairs and halves and using it as a measure word for pairs, checking and comparing, and saying as far as X is concerned with 对 X 来说. Very useful one there at the end. So listen, everyone, we now have an incredible new way to get involved with Mandarin Blueprint. It's called the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge. And guess what? You get lifetime access. That's right, lifetime access to phases 1 through 3 of the Blueprint. We call it the Blueprint Lite. You get lifetime access to 13 levels worth of flashcards. And why are we doing it? Because when you get to level 13, you're going to be reading real Chinese without the aid of pinyin. So you'll be able to read so much Chinese and be well on your way to fluency, because make no mistake, if you want to get fluent in Chinese, reading is your best hack you could possibly hope for, and we've cracked the code to getting your reading up to snuff. And you can get to that point of reading real Chinese sentences that are like subject verbs and objects and adverbs and adjectives, all that cool stuff, and it's happening within 30 days. In fact, we've had people do it in 2 days, but they're maniacs. But we have a 30-day schedule for you. You get lifetime access to it. You can follow the schedule, you can not follow the schedule, but click the link in the description because it's the best. You're going to have a great time, and it's free. So go check it out, and we'll see you in the next video.